I find it easy to be mesmerized by maps and satellite images. On spectacular images like this of Earth at night, land seems lighter and bodies of water darker. Beyond the distinct coastlines, one's attention is immediately drawn to the contrast between well-lit areas such as the Nile River Valley, the eastern United States, and vast areas void of light, such as Tibet and Amazonia. For an image of the continental United States at night, the contrast between dark versus light may not be as stark, but one can still see a clear distinction between the east and the west, between urban highlights and rural lowlights. An image like this, to me, is a perfect illustration and reminder that America is not homogeneous. America is geographically and economically diverse. Running a vast and diverse country efficiently depends to a very large extent on dividing responsibilities between federal, state, and local governments. The United States has been wrestling with this issue that econ nerds call fiscal federalism since its founding, as highlighted by the Jefferson-Hamilton debate. Hamilton's point was that a strong federal government is essential to promote interstate commerce and economic stability, while Jefferson emphasized the importance of preserving individual liberty through state rights. My main message for you today is that siding with Jefferson 100% or agreeing with Hamilton completely are both wrong and unhelpful, because both of these views can be right and they can be wrong in specific ways. A better approach seems to take both views and fuse them together. My poor effort of a Hamilton-Jefferson synthesis is that more power going into states and localities, known as devolution, is more advantageous when community needs are diverse. And I argue immigration is one policy area where more decentralization makes a lot of sense. On the other hand, more concentration of power at the federal level is more effective when states and localities cannot reap the full benefits of their own spending. And I argue that having a strong federal support is the best, if not the only way, to get big infrastructure projects built. I come to the States from China under student visa when I was about 20 years old. After spending nearly half of my entire life in this country, I am still a resident alien for tax purposes, not a permanent resident. Without going into the details, I can report to you that the current immigration system makes it unnecessarily hard for people like me to settle down and become American. In the last 15 years, there has been a 20% decline in the total fertility rate in the US. Over 80% of American counties have seen a decline in their prime working age population. These are just two out of many pieces of evidence that can point to show you that America is now full and America needs more immigrants. Apart from asylum seekers and refugees, some people can come to the US because they have family members here. They're called family reunification immigrants. Some others can come to the US because there are American companies who would like to hire them, and they are called employment-based or economic immigrants. Here, I want to focus on economic immigrants. Contrary to popular beliefs, economic immigrants do not steal jobs from native-born Americans because they tend to fill jobs that Americans aren't qualified to do or unwilling to take. For Americans that directly compete with these immigrant workers, yes, their labor market outcome will be affected, but the overall economy will be more prosperous because these immigrants need to buy stuff, need to get their stuff fixed, will get sick, and need to send their kids to school, creating jobs for builders, realtors, bankers, auto mechanics, plumbers, doctors, and educators. The federal government has maintained a near monopoly on the type and number of immigrants that enter the US since the late 19th century. Under the current system, Congress will set one-size-fits-all rules and regulations, and individual employers would be responsible for sponsoring work visas and permanent residency applications. The current system is riddled with deficiencies, and I'd like to just point out one. Since the early 2000s, the demand for skilled immigrants has steadily increased thanks partially to the tech sector. Yet, Congress has not raised the annual cap for the famous H-1B work visa. The result, there are more job offers extended to foreigners than there are work visas to go around. People need to go through a literal lottery to decide who can stay. Remember, these are people who got college degrees or above in America, have got job offers, and are likely to become dependable taxpayers. Yet America is turning them away. I found this situation outrageous and ridiculous. One reform idea that's deeply rooted in decentralization is that we allow states more autonomy and more power in immigration policy. We can keep all the current federal programs intact, but we open up a new pipeline, a new lane called state sponsorship. In that new lane, Congress would allow states to sponsor permanent residency applications or work visas using their own criteria under federal supervision. If New York has a big shortage of nurses and Kentucky needs a lot more accountants, then New York will set up rules that prioritize applications from registered nurses, and Kentucky would prioritize recruiting people who have passed the CPA exams. If 5 years later, let's say Kentucky realizes that they need more math teachers as opposed to accountants, then they can change the rules more easily and start recruiting math teachers. It just makes more sense to empower the states to attract the immigrants that they desire. One may ask, oh, how does it work in the real world? Wouldn't that create chaos? To prove its feasibility, I only have one word for you: Canada. Just like the US, Canada is a federal country of immigrants. On a per capita basis, Canada is more welcoming to immigrants compared to the US. Contrary to the US, Canada focuses much more on economic immigration and less on family reunification. In addition to various programs on the federal level, Canadian provinces can nominate foreigners for permanent residency under a program called the Provincial Nominee Program. Provinces would screen applications based on the list of job ads that they will update every year. In 2019, provincial nominees accounted for 20% of all immigrants and then 35% of economic immigrants. And the number will only go up if you check Canada's immigration plan for the next 3 to 5 years. I want to make it clear that this program allows different provinces to attract the immigrants that they desire in addition to the immigrants that the federal government in Canada lets in. A Cato Institute study back in 2020 suggested that these provincial nominees were dependable taxpayers, and they tend to stay in the provinces and nominate them to become Canadians much longer than what's legally required. And it is generally agreed that this program is a huge economic success. If we think about decentralization, maybe it's helpful to come up with a measurement of how powerful or powerless states and localities are. And I propose a very useful metric is the power of the purse. If we calculate regional and local taxes as a percentage of total taxation, Britain sits at 6%, France is at 14%, Germany 32%, and America 36%. By these telling statistics, you can see America in most policy areas is really living out Jefferson's dream. What can go wrong? Things can go very wrong if the tasks faced by state and local authorities are literally larger than themselves. My second story involves big infrastructure projects in transportation. Things like highways, railroads, seaports, they literally help move the economy faster and more smoothly. In reducing trade barriers, they help create a more integrated market and a more prosperous country. On the other hand, these projects require huge upfront investment and a yield of moderate return. It comes as no surprise that private companies tend to shy away from these investments. States and localities would not have enough incentives to do them if the benefits of having them would spill over to nearby jurisdictions that do not invest. Because nobody would like to tax themselves to build something that will benefit others. In this situation, it almost required the federal government to step in and make things happen. This is not just a mere thought experiment. It played out at least twice in American economic history. First, it was the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. People found gold in California in 1850. For the next 10 plus years, if you would like to go to California from the East Coast, you had to either endure a very bumpy journey on the wagons, or you had to go down to Panama or Cape Horn on a steamboat. You had to do it not because the railroad construction technology wasn't there, but because neither the free market nor the states en route, which weren't even states yet, had the incentive, right? Neither the free market nor the states had the incentive to carry out such an undertaking. Then Congress passed the Pacific Railroad Act of 1862, which enabled the U.S. government to issue 30-year bonds and gave out very generous land grants to railroad companies, 10 miles on both sides of the track. This land grants then enabled railroad companies to issue more bonds because now they got collateral. Only 7 years later, in 1869, the first transcontinental railroad was completed, largely by Irish and Chinese immigrants. Later in the 19th century, 4 out of 5 transcontinental railroads were built with similar federal assistance. Then we're going to talk about the highways that Americans have relied so heavily on today. Before 1920, road building was considered a local affair, with no guidance or support from the states or Washington, D.C. As a result, the interior of the U.S. was largely impassable by motor traffic. In 1919, it took a U.S. Army convoy 62 days to travel from Washington to San Francisco. In that convoy, there was a certain lieutenant colonel who later rose to become the Allied Supreme Commander in Europe during World War II, where he witnessed firsthand the impressive highways that Germany built in the 1930s, which ironically accelerated the demise of the Nazi regime because those highways made it so much easier for the Allies to move logistics using trucks. That young man is Dwight Eisenhower. When he became president and had the chance to revolutionize America's transportation infrastructure, he took it. Before Eisenhower, there was indeed an earlier wave of highway building in interwar years. This is the main topic of my PhD research. And these roads were largely built by the states. Congress would pitch in 30–40% of the construction costs, but they didn't dictate where and how the money was spent. As a result, over 40,000 miles of all-season roads were built, but these are not the superhighways that people will recognize nowadays. What Eisenhower envisioned is a system of highways that you could land planes on, a system that would serve as the arteries of the nation's transportation network. The federal government alone would decide the routes. They tend to be straight, connecting major cities. And the federal government alone would bear 90% of the construction costs. The product, the interstate highway system, which many lauded as the greatest infrastructure project in modern history. Hopefully, I've convinced you that no federal support led to no road, insufficient federal involvement led to acceptable roads, and then strong federal support led to great roads. Now think back to this mesmerizing image of the continental USA at night. It is clear from this image that America is now full and America is geographically and economically diverse. Immigration is the closest thing to a wonder drug there is in economics, yet the nation whose symbol is Statue of Liberty refuses to take a full dosage. To embrace immigration fully and efficiently, we ought to empower the states to attract the immigrants that they desire. America needs more immigrants. America also needs better infrastructure. Not enough infrastructure would be built by the states if the benefit of having them will spill over beyond their borders. Having a strong role for the federal government is indispensable because it is the sole body that will take into account a wider economic picture for the whole country and has the power to collect taxes nationwide. Fiscal federalism is a balancing act. The right solution really depends on the issue. So always be aware of people who offer simple solutions to complicated problems. Thank you.